Coming up on today's show.
So we always will kind of discuss the trend, but then look at the various implications that trend might have on various stakeholders, so internal and external stakeholders, different markets, industries, how it might affect the public or the wider economy.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. Whether you're at school, sixth form, university, thinking about a career in law, or exploring law careers, you're in the right place. We are the one-stop shop for student lawyers. If you'd like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com. This episode is sponsored by the University of Law. What really sets the University of Law apart from other universities is its belief that its students should learn in a realistic, professional and contemporary context. They focus exclusively on practice-based training and give students access to their extensive career service and jobs vacancy database as soon as they accept a place with them. Through the University of Law's Pro Bono program, law students can hone their skills by working on real cases before they graduate. The University of Law offers a range of postgraduate legal training and master's degrees designed by qualified experts to help students advance at any stage of their career. Their courses are employment-focused, honing key skills in a teaching environment based on real legal practice. Part-time and online study options are also available on many of their courses to help students work and study at the same time. To find out more about the courses on offer, click the link in the description box of the podcast. Welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. My name's Camilla and I'm an LPC student at the University of Law and I'm a future trainee solicitor, and I will be your host for today. On today's episode, we're delighted to be joined by Sibel Vurdu, a trainee solicitor at Thackray Williams and founder of BeComAware, which is a platform that teaches commercial awareness to aspiring lawyers. In today's episode, Sibel and I will be discussing her journey into law, tips and tricks for interviews and applications, and that all-important commercial awareness. So make sure you stick around to the end of the episode to hear all of that. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Sibel onto the show. Welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast, Sibel. It's great to have you on here today.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you for inviting me on. And of course, Happy New Year to all of our listeners.
Yes, Happy New Year to everyone. So let's start off by just asking maybe you to introduce yourself to the listeners and provide some insight into your career journey so far.
Excellent. So I am Sibel. I am a trainee solicitor due to qualify as a commercial real estate lawyer in March. I took the traditional academic route into law. So I completed the LLB law degree at the University of Essex. I then went on to complete an LLM in law and economics at Queen Mary University of London. And I think for me, even though my long-term career goal was always to become a lawyer, I think at that particular stage, approaching graduation at the end of my master's, I was kind of more drawn towards roles that were in the business and financial sector. Just because at the point that I was graduating, there was a real heightened emphasis that aspiring solicitors should have commercial awareness and have some kind of business experience to kind of understand different client perspectives. So I felt that prior experience in a different industry completely would kind of provide me with the different insights and offer me that, so that when I did finally enter the legal industry, I was obviously able to offer something different. So I think contrary to what we find a lot of aspiring solicitors doing at the point of graduation, which is obviously the application cycles, I was looking for different roles, to which I'd landed a role in fintech, financial technology. I actually completed the LPC part-time during that. And And obviously, when I completed the LPC, what I'd found is that the company I was employed by was experiencing rapid growth. So there were a lot of internal development opportunities. So I found myself kind of taking an unintentional detour away from law for a period of, say, 5 years. And that kind of provided me with different experiences. So I found myself progressing through various roles, such as client services, transaction monitoring, which was very much compliance-based, looking at service improvement. So we was involved in a lot of tech-based projects, automation and some AI. And then project management, I think, was my last kind of role there. We were quite involved with an interesting international expansion project. So really, that's kind of my work experience prior to law. And then I think I must have woken up one day and thought, I've got a lot of different experience now. I've completed the LPC, and let's kind of go back to applications, to which I'd landed my training contract at Thackray Williams, where I'm now qualifying in 2 months.
Oh, congratulations. That's so soon. That's such an interesting career journey, and I've taken sort of a similar route, although I didn't do anything as exciting as fintech. But I think when students leave university, obviously focuses on applications, and that's, that's absolutely fine, and maybe even getting paralegal roles. But I think that it's really important to highlight the fact that you don't need to necessarily get your first job in law to be successful in a career in law. It's absolutely fine to do other things, and actually that can make your CV a little bit more interesting. So yeah, I think that's really nice to hear your story. So let's move on to your training contract that you've almost completed. Can you tell us what seats you've done so far, and maybe some typical trainee tasks for each seat too?
Yes, of course. So in your training contract, you will need to complete seats in both contentious and non-contentious areas, and you'll need to complete seats in at least 3 distinct areas of law. So I completed seats. My first seat was in commercial property. I then went on to employment law in my second seat, and litigation in my third. I then returned back to commercial property in my fourth seat with a view to qualifying in the area. So commercial property is, of course, a non-contentious area of law. It's transactional and largely involves the kind of purchase and sale of commercial property, looking at leases and land development. Your client base is very vast, so you're dealing with investors, developers, business clients, landlords, tenants, and even public sector bodies. So, of course, very interesting. A typical trainee might find that they're involved in drafting kind of key documentation like leases, contracts, conditional contracts, unconditional leases, the under leases, rent deposit deeds, those kinds of things. You'll find that you might be drafting reports on titles, lease summaries, conducting due diligence on titles, conducting searches on behalf of your clients, obviously progressing transactions because it's largely transactional, and then of course raising inquiries to the other side, or assisting your client with preparing responses to the other side. And as well as that, I think you're quite involved with the land registry, so responding to requisitions on titles, completing all of the relevant forms and filing them at the land registry, so for example AP1s, and then of course taking new inquiries and providing that preliminary kind of guidance up front to potential new clients. So yes, it's quite vast and transactional. Employment law is a very interesting area of law. I'm yet to meet a trainee that hasn't enjoyed this area. It is a kind of cross between both contentious and non-contentious law, as well as kind of acting, again, for quite a broad client base range. So you might be acting for businesses or individuals, so employees or contractors. And the types of work that you might be involved in terms of the non-contentious side, obviously drafting employment contracts, staff handbooks or policies on behalf of your business clients, obviously to safeguard their legal position from an employment law perspective. And then, of course, on the contentious side, you might find that you're advising individuals on any potential employment claims that they might have, for example, in relation to constructive or unfair dismissal, whistleblowing claims, discrimination, and you might find that you're negotiating kind of settlement packages on their behalf. And of course, if you're acting for the business, then you'll be kind of defending their position. And you might find if you're not able to settle, that you're pursuing the matter all the way to the employment tribunal. So there's a lot of really interesting areas and issues going on there, as well as actually one thing that I found interesting in employment law were the post-termination restrictions, and advising both employees and obviously businesses on behalf of those and any kind of general contract disputes. And then I think finally for litigation, it's obviously a contentious area. It's largely concerned with the process of taking a matter all the way to court. You might find that your litigation team deals with the settlement pre-court stages. We recognise that as dispute resolution. So some teams might have that internal, so within the same department. I know that a lot of firms have a separate dispute resolution team that deal with kind of the pre-action kind of settlement negotiations. But the sorts of things that you'll be dealing with in litigation might be things like neighbour disputes. They are at an all-time high with the pandemic and everyone being at home. Kind of disputes about who owns what piece of land and, which area of the garden belongs to who. Breaches of commercial contracts, landlord and tenant disputes, professional negligence. And of course, you're involved in those processes and disputes, so preparing court bundles and the pre-action processes as well. So I think that's probably quite a comprehensive breakdown of what you might be involved in.
That's really helpful overview, so thank you. So I'm going to be starting my training contract next year, and sometimes I wonder how I'm going to decide on a practice area to qualify into, because from what I've seen so far of the practice areas, they all seem so interesting. So I just wondered, how did you decide that commercial real estate was the one for you?
Well, firstly, congratulations on the training contract.
Thank you so much. It's gone so quickly. I can't believe that I got the offer almost 2 years ago, and I'm going to be starting in August. I just don't know where the time goes, but yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, the training contract will go just as fast. So yeah, congratulations on that. For me, I think the commercial and property markets are highly sensitive to events occurring within the kind of wider and macro economy. I think the COVID-19 pandemic is a prime example of that. So the demand for office space and physical working space has obviously been impacted by social distancing measures, lockdown, quarantines, redundancies, and obviously remote working. So I think whilst there were initially a great deal of uncertainty about the future of commercial property, I think what we are kind of seeing now in reality is that the demand is obviously still out there. There is just a demand for different types of working environments and real estate for businesses to conduct their business. And I think for example, you have newer working spaces that reflect better worker safety. That might involve, for example, more indoor space, which is suitable for social distancing measures, commercial real estate with perhaps more outdoor areas, maybe touchless technology even. So I think what we'll probably see is that offices that are quite ill-equipped become quite obsolete post-pandemic. I think with that being said, there are other types of commercial properties and real estate which has increased in demand, and I think that's obviously fueled with not only the pandemic but also Brexit. So if we're looking at storage spacing and warehouses, they are quite hugely in demand. So where at the moment I think businesses are engaged in projects that are involving downsizing or moving around, that has meant that commercial property has remained quite a busy area of law. even during the pandemic. And obviously businesses are also repurposing at the moment. I think we've had what Boris Johnson described as the biggest shake-up to the planning permission system since the World War II. As he put it. And that's really allowed business owners to kind of switch more freely between use classes, providing kind of enhanced flexibility to boost business production and economic activity. So what I would say is if you have an interest in the commercial world and keeping quite current on current affairs, then commercial property may be an area for you, just because it is obviously highly sensitive to events occurring in the real world. It's obviously transactional based, so you're able to manage your time a lot better than perhaps other areas of law. But with that being said, of course, transactional work carries that element of high risk. So the work that you're conducting on behalf of your clients has real financial implications. So it obviously requires high attention to detail. It's obviously quite rare to meet your clients as opposed to other areas like employment law. But what you'll find is that you often have a lot of repeat work from your clients. So you're able to build long-lasting relationships. So I think that's always interesting. And just to add to that, from a personal level, I recently worked on a commercial real estate project, just a smaller typical lease, which happened to be in the local area. And once post-completion, I was quite heavily involved in the process. I actually happened to walk down the road where you'd seen the business setting up. And I think it is quite exciting to see how the world is changing around you, and how businesses are, getting on with their works as a result of perhaps the real estate projects that you're working on. So it is, of course, really an exciting area, I think.
Definitely. I really like the idea of being able to see the project that you've actually worked on and be able to walk past it and be like, oh, I was a key part of this transaction. So that does sound really, really interesting. So I just wondered if you had any tips for our listeners who might be starting their training contracts soon about how to succeed as a trainee solicitor.
Yes, absolutely. I think organisation is always going to be probably one of the key tips. I think there is an obligation by the SRA to kind of monitor training. Different firms do this in different ways, but with our firm, we prepare a weekly diary. So we track what we've actually worked on for the week, and then we report on what we've actually learned and taken away from the tasks that we've done. So I think a key bit of advice would be, if you do anything like that, to maybe perhaps keep on top of that, because that self-reflection is, I think, quite key to cover, what you've kind of learned during the week. In terms of tracking your own training and getting involved with as much as you can, I think that's another thing. So for example, if your firm do any kind of pro bono work, perhaps maybe volunteering to get involved in that. Offer your support where you have capacity, but on the flip side, if you find that you are quite inundated and you're not perhaps able to get through all of the work that is being given to you, I think it's quite important to manage expectations of your team and to let them know, what you're able to do, and you're able to prioritise your work that way. I think that's always quite important. And I think one of the key bits of advice that I always give to trainees, which is probably more unusual, and it's obviously subject to the kinds of culture that you have at your firm, but always raise new ideas. I think firms are always kind of mindful about the future of their firm and future leaders. So I think even being able to display those skills from an early stage as a trainee is always going to serve you in the longer run. So if you have any improvement ideas or anything, then I think it's always worth perhaps raising them. I really like that. So I just want to go back a little bit to the significant work experience that you built up in fintech and perhaps other roles. I do remember seeing that you had really great work experience when I was looking at your LinkedIn page to prepare for this interview. So I'd really like to know how you went about selling that non-law work experience when applying for training contracts, and whether you think this experience has benefited you in your training contract. Yes, no, absolutely. I think when there are thousands of applications, I think when they are whittled down to kind of the very best or strongest applications, it then can, I think, sometimes boil down to uniqueness. So is there something on that application form that a recruiter perhaps hasn't seen before? And I think that non-legal work experience is probably going to give you that edge more so than legal work experience. And I think for me, I have a lot of trainees ask me, should I include non-legal work experience in my applications or on my CV? And for me, it's an absolute no-brainer, particularly if you are interested in the kind of commercial corporate world or corporate side of law, then it's very important. And I dare I say, even in some ways, maybe more important. I think legal work experience will obviously show that and support your assertion that you are interested in law and that you want to become a lawyer. It obviously shows that you understand what the law entails, but also demonstrates kind of your initiative and that you've gone out to seek legal work experience. But the non-legal work experience, I think, really gives you that competitive edge, especially if you're looking for something different to kind of stand out on your application. So for me, I think it's definitely no doubt benefited me in my application processes and during my training contract itself. I think it's just, again, just being able to display something different. During my training contract, I think for me, taking the experiences away from what I'd acquired in fintech, I'm always kind of looking at more for ways to be more agile and more efficient ways of doing things. So, for example, efficiency of internal processes for client benefits, or even, how to keep ahead of the curve in terms of online presence, whether that be kind of social media, SEO, or online content. I think kind of we are in pretty much a digital age now. And I think where firms historically, probably particularly on the high street, relied on a client base that were within the kind of local community, local area, we've kind of moved away from that now with the digital age. And we kind of, with the development of the internet, we just have that kind of geographical client base being limitless. So I think that's going to be quite key as well. So if you have any experiences that give you any skills in different areas, then I think it's always important to raise them. And I think, I think it's worth adding. So I'm just mindful that I've spoken a lot about fintech, but with our listeners being largely student-based, I think it's worth mentioning that your non-legal work experience, it doesn't always need to be a very sophisticated role in a high-performing industry. So, for example, when I completed my master's, I was working part-time at Sainsbury's, so within the retail industry. And I think a lot of people or students might ask me, okay, so how do I write about retail experiences in my application? So obviously, if you're looking at the sorts of things that you're dealing with, you're building rapport with your colleagues and customers, you're advising on suitable alternative products for your customers, obviously working to tight deadlines as well when you're restocking the store during store closing hours. So there's a lot of things that you're doing that obviously provide you with those key transferable skills. So yeah, I think it's definitely a no-brainer that you do include those in your applications, and they will highly benefit you in the long run and during your training contracts.
I completely agree. I think non-legal work experience is so important to mention. I put down not all my supermarket experience, but I did work in a supermarket, so I included that as well. And if you think about it, I suppose you might even have a client which is a supermarket one day. So you understanding that you understand the business literally from the ground up is beneficial, I would assume. Before we get into the second half of the episode, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about the sponsors of today's show and the law school that I chose to study my LPC at, and that's the University of Law. The University of Law believes in training students for the real world from the moment they accept a place. Their experienced career service and award-winning pro bono clinics offer students the chance to get real-life experience from the start. They offer a range of postgraduate legal training and master's degrees designed by qualified experts to help students advance at any stage of their career. Their courses are employment focused, honing key skills in a teaching environment based on real legal practice. Part-time and online study options are also available on many of their courses to help students work and study at the same time. To find out more about the courses on offer, click the link in the description box of the podcast.
So I just wondered whether there were any challenges that you experienced in your path to qualifying as a solicitor, and if you did experience any challenges, how you overcame those?
Yes, of course. I think rejection is got to be the first one. I think we've all experienced rejection at some point. And I think, yeah, I mean, for me, going back to university when I was making the kind of initial applications during the application cycles, I mean, in hindsight now, I'm not entirely surprised at the kind of outcome when looking at those applications. But no, I think rejection is probably one of the key challenges that most students will face. And for me, I kind of took away the way I approached it. I took a bit of a detour, as I've mentioned, away from law. Obviously that was, partly intentional, but I think it also allowed me to kind of go away and develop outside of the law and develop and acquire some skills that perhaps law would never have given me. So that's one way I dealt with it, but also obviously developing application skills. So really kind of mastering the art of selling yourself, if you like. So yeah, I think if you have any kinds of mentors or anything like that that can assist you with kind of proofreading applications and support your kind of application skills and give you feedback, then I think that's something that is always going to be very helpful. But I think, yeah, always developing kind of the way to sell yourself and how to write applications, I think. But with that being said, I think it's important to highlight that once you have kind of mastered the art, if you like, I think we always assume that if we are still facing rejection at that particular point, that we're doing something wrong. And I think that at that particular stage, that it might just mean that you need a bit of perseverance and just to keep going, because you might not know how close you were.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I resonate with the rejection one. I think you have to remember that there are a lot of people applying, so rejections are inevitable. And as long as you keep improving, maybe 1% or 2%, hopefully more than that. But if you at least keep improving with every application, then eventually you'll get there. So I think that's a great message. Okay, so I'd love to learn a little bit more about BeComAware and why you decided to set the platform up.
Yes, of course. So BeComAware is, just to give you some context, it is an educational hub and e-learning platform. It's designed to teach commercial awareness. Now, we know that commercial awareness is a real buzzword within the legal industry, but I think how to acquire it has remained somewhat of a mystery. I think there's a lot of talk from students and a lot of advice given about commercial awareness, that it's acquired by following news trends. And when I do speak with a lot of students, this is really unhelpful advice, particularly when you are first starting out with commercial awareness. And that's because you really are kind of presented with a lot of commercial jargon and commercial language that a lot of students might just simply not understand. They may not be familiar with, how the wider business world operates. And I think, ultimately it becomes very difficult to even understand the nature of what you're reading, let alone try to acquire your own opinions on matters. And I think what you'll find is that a lot of students end up regurgitating commercial facts and figures that they've read or heard in the news. So, of course, that's really unhelpful during an interview or an application, because you're just simply fact stating. And now, obviously, that's not the nature of commercial awareness. So BeComAware was really launched to kind of provide that stepping stone into commercial awareness. So it's an educational platform, really designed so that if you do pick up the FT, you actually have a chance at understanding it. as well as formulating your own opinion. So what we do is we kind of teach the commercial language. We teach our members about the wider business world and keep them informed on key trends. And I think all of our content as well, it follows a specific structure there and what it aims to do.
That sounds really, really helpful, and something that I definitely would have found helpful when I was going through the process, and even at university, because I remember having a workshop about commercial awareness. It was like a 1 hour thing that we had to go to, and they literally said, basically, read the news, and if you've worked in a supermarket, then you've got commercial awareness. I thought, okay, well, I've done that, and read the news, and it just really wasn't helpful. So I think platforms such as BeComAware are incredibly useful for students, and for all the listeners, I will leave a link to BeComAware as well in the description box wherever you're listening to this podcast, so you can go and check it out. So what are your top tips for developing and demonstrating commercial awareness? I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, sign up to BeComAware. We have on BeComAware, we have, if you sign up with the promotional code that's advertised everywhere at the moment, and on the website, there is a free application review as well that comes with it. So just to throw that there. I think I've touched on it before in the previous question, but I think just to tie it into this one, top tips for developing and demonstrating commercial awareness. So I think, as we say, it's not really about following the news and regurgitating the kinds of facts and figures. It's about trying to formulate your own opinions on things. Now, if you are somebody that struggles with commercial awareness, I think the key kind of starting point is really to kind of understand the language that's being used. So when you are going through these articles, you might want to pull up the kind of jargon buster glossary that we have, or just simply Google it, just to understand the nature of what you're reading before you can start to think about maybe what the implications are. Just to take a random example, the microchip shortage that we have at the moment, just to kind of think about, okay, so what are the facts? What are microchips used for? What are the implications it's causing on various areas? So, for example, inflation, when we're looking at the products such as computers, what impact is it having on those and the supply of these products, as well as, for example, the second-hand car market. We know that that's booming at the moment, just because of how long it takes to order a new car. I think it's probably about 10 months now, isn't it, as opposed to 6 to 8 weeks. So the second-hand car market are doing really well. Prices are going really high as a result of that. So it's just really being able to observe how the wider business world and what the implications of various trends, what they actually are, as opposed to just being able to simply state, okay, I'm aware that there's a chip shortage, but what does it mean? And I think that's the key thing. But also being able to speak the commercial language, I think, is also a key way to kind of demonstrate commercial awareness. And I think we're due to speak about training contract applications, but so maybe I'll save it for that. But I think being able to speak the language throughout is something that allows you to kind of demonstrate your commercial awareness, as opposed to just displaying it when you're talking about a commercial or current affair.
Brilliant advice. Hopefully the listeners can definitely, next time they're looking at an article, actually think about those things that you've mentioned. I think that would be a really good starting point, as you said. I'd love to hear your top tips for the training contract application and interview process.
Absolutely. So of course, we've got all the kind of generic advice. So, my top one, before I go into all of the generic, is obviously to sound commercial. And I think that's really what kind of gives you that competitive edge in applications is sounding commercial throughout, not just during the kind of specific commercial awareness questions. So, discuss a trend of your interest, or please explain how, for example, this trend might impact our particular firm. It's something that you can display throughout by utilising the appropriate language. Obviously, spelling issues and grammar, that all kind of needs to be on point. I think recruiters, sometimes they kind of allow, margin for error. But if you've got an application that's not been proofread, that's obviously going to be something that a recruiter can instantly identify. Tailored applications are obviously very key, because again, recruiters can instantly identify when an application has been tailored. And I think into that point, you need to ensure that the points that you're making in your application are always being tied back to your experiences. And the reason for that is because otherwise it just simply looks like you're fact stating, and it gives it that more kind of generic appearance. But if you can tie the points that you're raising back into your personal experiences, that's really what kind of makes it look a lot more tailored. So for example, why are you interested in law? Just giving the examples about maybe work experience that you've had and the reasons that you're interested in it from the experiences that you've had. So I think that's another key point. Obviously, I think you mentioned interview as well, didn't we? Interview process.
Yeah.
That's always an interesting one. How to get interview experiences. There was actually one stage, I was applying for jobs. I was looking for alternative roles to see what was out there, but it was mainly to kind of bag interview experience. And to kind of meet new people. I'm not publicly advertising that you go and waste yours and recruiters' time, but if you do have a mentor that can help you practice and brush up on your interview experience, then I would take the opportunity to do that. Because speaking about yourself, I think it's almost a skill. And I think once you do get a bit of experience doing that, then you become a lot more comfortable in selling yourself and discussing the kinds of experiences that you've had. So practice makes perfect, they say. And you're probably closer to the application cycle process than I was. It's been a couple of years for me now. Is there anything you'd add to that? Just interested.
Yeah, I completely agree with the practicing thing because, for example, there's someone that I'm mentoring at the moment, and we've been doing weekly interview practice, and she's improved so much in just a few sessions. Yeah. So that's really good. For me, I think so I got my training contract after a few interviews, so it's definitely practice, but it's obviously best not to save the practice for the real thing. I also videoed myself on Zoom a few times answering questions, which was it's I suppose an alternative for if you don't have anyone to ask you questions, you can kind of ask them to yourself, video yourself, and then watch it back and be really critical about where you can improve. And yeah, I think it's just learning to sell yourself, which people I think struggle with, and it's also being confident as well. So developing confidence, selling yourself, and practicing, and I think eventually when those three things come together, you're in a really good position. That's what I would say.
Just to add to that point about being confident as well, I've seen a report when I'd done an interview before. I think it was another role in the finance kind of sector. I was looking at the section where we were being interviewed by I think two of the partners within a different kind of industry, but they mentioned that I said I was not nervous, but I think they asked me about my weaknesses, and I think I gave the example of commercial awareness, public speaking, because I think public speaking is always my kind of go-to answer when I'm discussing weaknesses, because it's always something that you have to acquire and practice on. And I think they said that I listed that as my weakness, but I'd appeared confident. And I think one of the key ways to do that is to slow down. If you are someone that gets nervous in an interview, is to really kind of slow down, maybe even speak slower. It just gives you a chance to kind of recollect your thoughts and say the right things. But it also allows you to come across probably more confident. I think when you are speaking very quickly, it can perhaps give the impression that you're a bit more nervous.
That's definitely true. Definitely true. I think that's great advice. And I suppose that's where having a mentor, having the opportunity to record yourself and watching it back, you can then think, am I speaking too fast? let me practice speaking a bit slower. Yeah, that's great advice. And yeah, I'm definitely with you on the public speaking thing, but I think I've improved quite a lot since starting the podcast and doing various other things like debating online, debating clubs and things like that. So that definitely helped me with being more confident on Zoom, because I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I was really nervous to take myself off mute and introduce myself, like my name and who I was. I was literally shaking. So going from that to going, being confident when actually on a Zoom interview, it just took practice and putting myself in as many positions as I could where I was on camera and speaking to other people. So if that's something that you need to work on, then that's definitely my advice for that. Okay, so thank you for all of your advice, Sibel, on that. And I'd just like to kind of finish off by asking you about how you manage your time, because I think it's so inspiring that you managed to complete your training contract, plus you've grown BeComAware. Yeah, it seems like you just are really great at managing your time, and I'd love to hear your tips on time management.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it. It is extremely time consuming and time demanding. I am someone who is very process driven, so I think that always kind of aids the process and allows things to be completed with perhaps more ease. But I think if you ask anybody who's kind of entrepreneurial, gets involved in a lot of extracurricular activities, or launches their own kind of projects, side gigs, that kind of thing, you'll know that it is extremely time consuming, and it really does require a huge amount of passion. I think ultimately is what it boils down to, is, when you have free time, is this something that you choose to do? Because it is just time consuming. I mean, I am actually looking at new ways to kind of automate processes. So for example, via mailing lists and automating the way that social media posts are being sent out, just for time efficiency and to increase output. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it's probably organisation is obviously key, but I'd be lying if I said I was always organised. We of course always have we have ambassadors that assist with the platform as well. So there is kind of a process in place there where content is produced and then reviewed and approved by our network of professional ambassadors. So it kind of goes through a process, and I do definitely have a lot of support on the platform. But yeah, I mean, it is time consuming, but I think from the feedback that we get on the platform, it's definitely worth every minute.
Fantastic. And finally, before we let you go, are there any non-law books, podcasts or films that you've enjoyed recently?
That's a good question, and one that makes me feel very boring outside of work. I've actually got the Conveyancing Handbook on my desk upstairs. I've got the LPC, commercial property books, the Estate Gazette. I've started listening to the Estate Gazette podcast just because it's relevant to my particular area. It's more kind of niche and focuses on the kind of specialist area that I'll be going into in law. I think you're looking more for outside of work, so general films. Are we talking general films?
Yeah, just anything general maybe something that you've seen on Netflix recently which you think is really good, anything like that. I don't know if you watch Netflix.
I do watch Netflix. I saw the new Spider-Man recently.
Okay.
Anyway, I won't give any spoilers. I know that there are huge fanatics out there.
Right, they'll come for you if you give it all away.
I was that one where they would say, Sibel, which Disney princess would you be? When I was younger, and I'd always say Spider-Man.
Oh, I love that.
If it wasn't Ariel, it was Spider-Man.
That's so cool. Okay, thank you so much, Sibel, for all of your time today. You've given so many great nuggets of advice, and it's been great to have you as a guest on the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to all the listeners or anyone who's watching this as well. And I'll leave the links, as I said before, to BeComAware in the description, and any other details that I think you might find helpful. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.
This episode is sponsored by the University of Law. What really sets the University of Law apart from other universities is its belief that its students should learn in a realistic, professional and contemporary context. They focus exclusively on practice-based training and give students access to their extensive career service and jobs vacancy database as soon as they accept a place. Through the University of Law's Pro Bono program, law students can hone their skills by working on real cases before they graduate. The University of Law offers a range of postgraduate legal training and master's degrees designed by qualified experts to help students advance at any stage of their career. Their courses are employment focused, honing key skills in a teaching environment based on real legal practice. Part-time and online study options are also available on many of their courses to help students work and study at the same time. The University of Law will help you reach your ambitions by delivering an outstanding academic and employment-focused experience, honing key skills in a teaching environment based on real legal practice. As soon as you begin your studies with ULaw, you'll learn how to think and act like a lawyer. Whether your aspirations are in law or other fields, their courses will balance academic rigor and practical skills so your career starts from day one. To find out more about the courses they have on offer, just click the link in the description box of the podcast.
To hear more of the Student Lawyers podcast, hit the subscribe button and leave us a star rating and review. If you would like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com.